August 1856, a limestone quarry in Germany's Neander Valley. Workers are blasting rock for a factory expansion. They break into a narrow cave, sealed off for thousands of years. Inside, half buried in hardened clay, they find bones. A skull with a heavy, sloping brow ridge, thick, curved limb bones. The workers assume they've stumbled onto an old grave and keep digging anyway. 16 bones survive the blasting. The rest are lost to the rubble forever. The quarry owner takes one look and assumes it's a bear. He's wrong. A local school teacher named Johann Karl Fuhlrott hears about the find and asks to examine it before it's thrown away. He notices something the workers missed entirely. These bones don't match any known animal, and they don't quite match a modern human either. The skull is too thick, the brow too heavy, the proportions too strange. The valley itself is named after a hymn writer, Joachim Neander, who used to walk there a century earlier to write music. He had no idea he'd eventually lend his name to an entire branch of the human family tree. So what exactly did these men just dig out of a hillside?
For 3 years, nobody has a real answer. Then, in 1859, everything shifts. Charles Darwin publishes On the Origin of Species. Suddenly, ideas like extinction and deep ancestry become scientifically thinkable. But not everyone is ready to think them. A prominent pathologist named Rudolf Virchow examines the same bones and reaches a very different conclusion. The brow ridge, he claims, is from disease, rickets specifically. The bowed legs, he says, come from a lifetime spent on horseback. His final ruling? These are the bones of a sick Cossack soldier who crawled into the cave to die. A deformed soldier, not an ancient species. Case closed. Virchow was one of the most respected scientists in Europe. When he spoke, most of the field listened. For years, his diagnosis buries the discovery almost as deep as the cave had. Except it isn't. In 1864, a geologist named William King does something no one else had dared to do. He gives the bones their own scientific name, Homo neanderthalensis. For the first time, a separate species of human has an official title. And Feldhofer Cave, it turns out, wasn't unique at all. Similar bones begin surfacing across Europe: Belgium, Croatia, Gibraltar, France. Some of those bones had been sitting in museum drawers for decades, mislabeled and ignored. If the very first Neanderthal skeleton had been found in Gibraltar instead, in 1848, would the whole story have gone differently? By 1908, researchers uncover a nearly complete skeleton at La Chapelle aux Saints. A paleontologist named Marceline Boule is given the job of reconstructing it for the public. His version is hunched, slouching, knuckles nearly scraping the ground. That image, a dim-witted brute dragging a club, lodges in the public imagination for the next 100 years. It even shapes cartoons, movies, and insurance commercials for generations.
There's just one problem. Boule's reconstruction was wrong. Decades later, scientists re-examined the same skeleton with fresh eyes. The man had severe arthritis. He was old, injured, and bent by disease, not by his species. A healthy Neanderthal stood fully upright and walked essentially the way you do. Their brains, on average, were slightly larger than a modern human brain. Their toolkits included a precise flaking method now called the Levallois technique, requiring planning several steps ahead. Neanderthals survived European winters for over 300,000 years, across ice ages that would kill most modern humans within days without technology. They ranged from Portugal in the west to Siberia in the east, adapting to deserts, mountains, and frozen tundra along the way. So, why does the myth of the slow, hunched caveman refuse to die? Maybe it's easier to feel superior to an extinct species if you convince yourself it never stood a chance. Because the deeper researchers dig, the harder that story becomes to defend. In Shanidar Cave, Iraq, Neanderthals buried their dead deliberately in marked graves. Some of those graves contain pollen clusters, suggesting flowers may have been placed with the body. In Spain, Neanderthals painted on cave walls at least 64,000 years ago. That's roughly 20,000 years before modern humans ever set foot in Europe. They crafted jewelry from eagle talons. They cared for injured group members for years, not days, before those individuals eventually died. One skeleton from Shanidar, known as Shanidar 1, shows a healed amputation. A man who survived a missing forearm for decades in a hunting society. Someone had to feed him. Someone had to protect him. That doesn't happen by accident. In France, researchers found what looks like a deliberately built ring of stalagmites deep inside a pitch-black cave, dated to 176,000 years ago. Building it would have meant carrying fire far underground, on purpose, for a reason nobody living today can fully explain. None of that behavior belongs to a mindless animal running on instinct alone.
So the real question stops being why did they disappear? It becomes, did they actually disappear at all? In 2006, a scientist named Svante Pääbo begins a project that sounds nearly impossible, sequencing usable DNA from bones tens of thousands of years old. His team at the Max Planck Institute extracts genetic material from fragments so degraded, most labs had written the idea off completely. Ancient DNA breaks down over time and gets contaminated by every bacteria and every human who ever touched it. Separating 50,000-year-old genetic material from modern contamination takes years of careful, painstaking lab work. In 2010, they publish a full draft of the Neanderthal genome. Then, they compare it directly to modern human DNA, and the result rewrites the entire narrative. Roughly 2% of the DNA in every person of non-African descent traces directly back to Neanderthals. That means tens of thousands of years ago, Neanderthals and the ancestors of most living humans had children together. Not once, repeatedly, across thousands of years in multiple regions. Some studies now suggest at least 3 separate waves of interbreeding in different parts of the world. A related discovery, based on a single finger bone from a Siberian cave, reveals an entirely different group, the Denisovans, cousins to both Neanderthals and us. Some populations in Southeast Asia and Oceania carry up to 5% Denisovan DNA today. The family tree, it turns out, was never a single clean branch. It was a tangle. In 2022, Svante Pääbo receives the Nobel Prize in Physiology or Medicine for this exact body of work.
So here's the reframe. For over a century, we told ourselves a tidy story. Neanderthals went extinct. The smarter species simply outlasted them. But extinction implies a clean ending, a hard line between them and us. There isn't one. Trace your own ancestry back far enough, and if your family isn't entirely of African descent, there's a real chance a Neanderthal sits somewhere in that tree. Their genes still shape how some of us process fat, how our immune systems respond to certain viruses, and according to some research, whether we lean toward being night owls. Some of that inherited DNA even affects how severely certain people react to modern viral infections, a link researchers only confirmed in the last few years. Doesn't it change something knowing extinction isn't always the end of a story? They didn't lose their story. They stopped being a separate one. The next time your body fights off a cold, part of that defense might be older than 50,000 years, and it isn't originally yours. It's theirs. Somewhere in the Neander Valley today, there's a museum standing, almost exactly where the quarry once was. Visitors walk through, look at reconstructed faces behind glass, and think they're looking at something that ended. They aren't. The species we spent over a century calling extinct never actually left the building. They're still here. They're just wearing our faces now.